The whole purpose of doing this is to bring money home. There's
Right,
two.
but it works that
let me
first year,
finish.
Senator.
Hey, let me finish. Hey, Kelly. Hey,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Quiet.
Go ahead.
Calm down a bit here, Kelly.
I did write about Ariana Grande, and I did write about the abusive, bigoted,
Those pieces were a little smarter than your piece about threatening the sovereignty of a whole religion. All right, I gotta go. You should stick to the thigh-high boots. You're better at that.
I'm gonna give you one more chance to answer my question, and then we're gonna be done here because you're actually wasting my time when you talk over me and don't answer my question.
When you're not talking.
Oh, well, then if I'm wasting your
Americans.
time, then goodbye. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Joy.
I feel like there's like a constructive fury that has resulted in a resolute pursuit of equity.
I've been waiting to feel less angry.
Sir, I'm giving you 175 years. I just signed your death warrant.
My teammates and friends have been through enough, and now it's time for change.
I'm gonna take a shower. You sit there and have a drink. Water.
Don't drink. Can I stay on the bar?
No, you must come here now.
No.
Please.
No, I don't want to.
I'm not doing anything with you. Now you're embarrassing me.
I'm sorry, I
No,
cannot.
come in
No,
here.
yesterday was a kind of aggressive for
I
me.
know.
I need to know a person to
I
be
won't
touched.
do a thing. Please, I swear I won't.
Oh, horrifying.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zainab Salbi. I'm the founder of Women for Women International and the host of Me Too, Now What? And I am so excited, as I'm sure all of you are, for this moment is like no other moment for women in history. And I am here with 4 amazing warriors fighting this movement. So here we are. I want to start with Joy. Joy, the New York Times just hailed you as the heroine of the resistance. You go to serve for your show AM Joy on MSNBC. I want to start by asking about Steve Bannon's latest warning to Trump.
Yeah.
That the anti-patriarchy movement is a powerful political force that will, quote, undo tens of thousands of years of recorded history. Your take?
Well, you know, far be it from me to agree with Steve Bannon. And by the way, let's not assume that he's saying that in a positive way. I mean, this is a fear that the so-called alpha man has, that women are going to finally wake up and realize that our rights are not guaranteed, that we have to fight for them, that there are certain men still in place that think it's 1950 or 1920 or 1890, and that women are still essentially the property of men, and that women must submit to men. And I think that part of what Trumpism was about reasserting what they felt was the proper role of the man at the head of the household, at the head of the country, sort of pushing women to the back. And this nostalgia for the 1950s is what drove, if you look at the data, drove Trumpism. Bannon has realized that that dam has broken and that women are not going to put up with it. They're not going to sit still for it. And I think that he has a fear that is probably valid that women are about to fight back.
Well, we are fighting. We're not going to give up. I want to go to Kara as one of the top journalists covering Silicon Valley. You called it a modern-day utopia where anybody can change the world if you are a man. Has that changed in Silicon Valley now that so many men have been called out for their...
No, not even slightly.
No.
Sorry.
Really?
No. You know, I think what's interesting is there's a lot of people saying the right things and speaking to speak, but the numbers remain pretty much the same, where it's, you know, Google, which has quite a few women in positions of power. I just interviewed one, Susan Wojcicki, at our conference yesterday. It's still a 70% white men, pretty much, 30% everybody else. And women, and then if you go into the engineering thing, it's 90 to 10, and that's where the real power is. So no, they continue to persist, and I've said this so many times at various events, but I'll say it again. They call it a meritocracy, and I call it a mirrortocracy. It's white men looking at other white men and picking white men. And so they continue to perpetuate it. They're nicer than other, you know, they feel badly about it, or say they do. They feel really, they do. They do, and you want to just slap them silly. But it's, the numbers are the same. The numbers and the numbers of people in charge are the same. So, no.
But then this is the discussion, is how do we change it?
Well, you know, it's interesting because one of the things I was just talking about before, I start with, say, boards of companies. That's where I think it's a really interesting thing, because there's plenty, they can make arguments about the pipeline, there's not enough women engineers, this. They have all kinds of excuses. When you come to boards, there's qualified people of all kinds to serve on these boards. And if these are companies that see themselves as tolerant and forward-thinking and innovation in future, they should be able to fill their boards where a lot of decisions are made with a diverse group of people. And they just don't do it. And so what I found really interesting is the only time they use the word, and they always pull out the word, we have standards, right? We have standards. The only time they use the word standards is when it comes to women and people of color. Oh, we have standards, so we have to stick to our standards. And I'm always like, well, the 10 white guys that drove Twitter into a wall, so you didn't have standards there. You had standards for incompetence, I guess. And so it's a really interesting question, because it's hard for them to, it's hard, because it's like punching, like, I don't know what, it's sort of like punching cotton. They're like, oh, so sorry, you know. So it's hard.
I think it's also, it's hard though, because if you have all these white men on the board, right? And they say that, of course, we believe in equality, and yes, we want to have more diversity, but that means one of them has to go. And it's like me going, yeah, I want more diversity if Jim goes and Jack goes, but I'm going to stay, because but nobody wants to, you know, everybody wants the, you know, being in Hollywood, it's something that's been really frustrating for me, is just that, you know, we're really great at symbolism and really crappy at actual change.
Right.
And so everyone's talking, but no one's really doing it. I think I'm not even quite sure what it takes to get there, but some people have to lose their spot, but then where will they go? And it's this kind of like, you have to ask those people to step down or ask the people to fire those people. I'm not quite sure. I mean, even there are women who I know who are very vocal in the movement, women of color who, you know, and we hear amongst us like, oh, what story is about to come out soon? You know, we're like, oh, do you hear this person? Do you hear this person? And there's been, you know, times in group discussions where we've brought up, oh, someone's co-star. We heard this is how, and then there was one particular instance where this one actress was like, oh, man, but my show. And it resonated with me so much, because that's the same for her as it is for the white men on the board. Same for every individual. I think it's, you know, you have to take one out to make room for the other. If this bad guy is on your show might go down. Are you willing to do what's right? Are you willing to take the hit personally for what the right thing is to do?
I think because I think this is what we need to talk about, is the price of saying no, and the price to really live up to your values. You know, it's sort of, there is a price and there is a cost in it, and what does that mean? And Nancy, I want to actually ask you a question, because you're the CEO and president of A&E, and you said no to Harvey Weinstein when no one, I mean, now everyone's like, oh, we can say no to him, but you said no when he was the top of the mountain, you know, and can you tell us more about that? And did you worry about risking or paying a price for your no?
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial no, well, I said no that weekend when he called me. And
what did he call for?
He needed my help to get out of this. And I said, I think it's time that you go and address your family. And I asked him, was there anything I didn't know? And he said, no. And everything unfolded the following 12 days. You know, I think I had a very, didn't have a sexual relationship with Harvey Weinstein, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I had a, you know, a business relationship, and I had just taken over Lifetime. I was pretty naive. I canceled Models of the Runway, which was a show that was on after Project Runway, pretty quickly. He called me and told me that he would ruin my career. He used the C word. I will kill you. I will go to all your bosses. I will this, I will that. I hung up because I was probably a little afraid. Mm-hmm. And then I got mad. And then he called back a couple days later, and I wouldn't take his call. And that was like the defining moment. I stood up, and he never ever did that again. And I don't know how to, it's not that I was so smart. I did it out of protection and instinct, right? Like, I'm going to hang up, and then I'm going to figure out if I'm really in trouble. Did I do something like really wrong, or did I, you know, just happen to stand up to a bully? But I don't feel particularly proud of that, because I didn't in the moment go, I'm going to stand up to him. My instinct was to just hang up the phone and hope he never called back, and that I wasn't in trouble. But, you know, I think we have to figure out how to create an environment that's safe for women to do that consciously. And it's the, you know, the unconscious action that I did needs to be conscious on behalf of everybody. Like, safety's bar one, right? Like, you can't have an environment where people don't feel safe. Like, that's just the entry level here.
Yeah. Olivia, how hard is it? I mean, you were one of the silence breaker in Hollywood, actually, and spoke about what director Brett Ratner did to you. How hard is it, though, when there is a culture of complacency in Hollywood? You know, and what do you do if you're a young actress who just started her career? You know, can she break her silence right now without risking her career?
So what happened to me happened in 2004, and then that's when I first came out to California, and I, you know, neither I nor Ratner or any of us, I think, would have known that I would, you know, be in the position I am today. So I was like a lot of other girls who were coming out here, and then in 2010, I had a book that came out, and I wrote about what happened anonymously in the book, you know, just to, you know, for legal reasons, you can't call people out. And then in 2011, on his own volition, he admitted to that chapter in the book, and on a talk show on TV, and he admitted to it, and then lied about it, and he said, oh yeah, I banged Olivia Munn, but I forgot about her. And at the time, I was on The Daily Show. I'd just come on The Daily Show, so, you know, for me, I'm first generation American. You know, I grew up in a military family. I was just hoping to get callbacks for like a Taco Bell commercial. Like, I couldn't even imagine like being on The Daily Show, and then here I am. And when I heard that, my heart dropped, because I knew that it wouldn't matter whatever I said. Even if you look at every guy I ever dated and then him, it wouldn't match up. But yet people would want to believe that I only got to where I got because I had to do something with that guy. And through a sequence of, I think, just, you know, good luck and a lot of praying, just a couple days after that, he went onto the Howard Stern show and admitted that he lied. He said, I lied, I never had sex with her, I never dated her. And then I felt redeemed. 2 years after that, he gets a $350 million deal with Warner Brothers. And that's actually still in place now, even though they've, you know, spoken out about, oh, we've removed him from the premises and all that, but he still is making a lot of money off of a lot of people. And so when that happened, it was like, I knew that it just didn't matter. It doesn't matter to me what the truth is. It doesn't matter, because for whatever reason, men and women wanted to believe it.
And here's a question for today, for all of us, for me, is we need to follow the money. In Silicon Valley, in Hollywood, in politics, and everywhere, we need to follow the money. If the money is not behind women, then I don't believe all the nice talks, in my opinion. And then we also need to follow the politics, and I want to take it back to you, Joy. Because, you know, news today came out that the Trump administration and President Trump himself not only protected his aide, Rob Porter, but actually Rob Porter was up for a promotion. You know, is this the first time the administration is doing it, or is this becoming a pattern that the administration is protecting abusive men?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a pattern.
Is this a pattern?
In the administration, right?
Let's just, like, I'm just trying to be politically correct here.
I don't know. Wait, is it a pattern? Like, what?
I mean,
No, it's just the way.
It's just the way they are. I mean, we live in a culture where the instinct is to protect the career of the man. And Donald Trump exemplifies that instinct. He's done it, whether it was Mike Tyson in the case where he said, well, you know, I don't know what that girl was doing. Where he nominated a guy named Andy Puzder, who was accused of sexual misconduct. And he said, well, he says he didn't do it. You go to Roy Moore, who was accused of serial child molestation against girls. Well, he says he didn't do it. You have to listen to that. Rob Porter, who was allowed to sit with reporters on background, put up there by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a woman who's working for the administration, and allowed to tell his side of the story, even though the entire White House senior staff already knew, because the FBI had delivered not one, not two, but 3 reports, starting in March, then in July, then in November, when they closed his case. He could not get a security clearance because he was a beater. They knew that, but their instinct was, Rob's a great guy. Rob is competent. Rob is someone we need. We've got to protect him from these women. And so the instinct of everyone, not just Trump, but everyone around Trump, is to say, protect the man, discard the women. And they even draw women into it. I mean, you have Hope Hicks, who's dating Rob Portman, asked to write up his statement. So what you have is you have this sort of conspiracy of protection that's enveloped around men. And it's in, I think, all of these industries, because they're seen as the valuable
passing thing. I mean, I was thinking on the Amazon Roy Price thing, the first investigation of him, they let him off with a slap on the wrist. The first one, we wrote a story about how, I think, the management of Amazon, 16 men, no women, one woman, I think it was, something like that. And they got furious over that. And we're like, we're just putting your management list up for you and putting pictures next to it. Like, I'm not sure why that's groundbreaking reporting. But what was interesting is they let him pass the first, like the letting them pass is what happens. Oh, you know,
Ailes,
he's a good
O'Reilly,
guy.
But I think the reason is because there is this assumption that, one, yes, protect each other, but also there's not, it won't anger that many people. Will they be that upset if this happens to him? Like, what's happening now, and I said this in this LA Times article, that was like, they're not woke, they're scared. This is the bottom line. I keep coming back to it when people would say about people like Uma Thurman coming out recently, and everybody's like, well, why didn't you say that before? And I'm like, because it didn't matter before, and I'm telling you, because my shit came out in 2011, and no one cared. No one cared at all, and privately, I would always fight that battle. I mean, I've had discussions, and I called out Brian Grazer in a private meeting, and I turned down work from him after that. I always fought it privately, but I knew publicly it didn't matter. But some reason right now, I don't know why, but I still don't know why, but the more outrage that comes from the people, especially with social media being so powerful in this, the more people are outraged, it just keeps that fire on them, that spotlight, and they have to make changes. And that is the people. I mean,
except what is happening now, which I think is really interesting when I think about this idea of that outrage. A lot of what's going right now, like you think of South Africa, truth and reconciliation. They want to go right to reconciliation.
Right.
And I want to stay in truth for a very long time. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Rightly so.
And
Rightly
not for
so.
a little bit, but what happens, and again, it's the same thing with women. Come on. Give them a break. Like, come on, let it pass. And we wrote a lot about Uber. And at one point, someone there, I can't say who, but she has an accent. And she's like, she said, Carol, give him a break. You know who I'm talking about. She's like, come on, give Travis a break. You know what I mean? And we had an argument about the Old Testament and the New Testament. And she's like, be the New Testament. I'm like, no, I'm the Old Testament. He's going down. And it was really interesting. And a lot of people were doing that. Like, you've got to give him a break. You've got to give him a chance. You got to give him a rest. I said, unless he stays down, I'm not stopping. And I said, he's got to stay down. And when he gets up, I'm going to hit him again because there's and it's not stuff I'm hitting him with. He did it, and I'm just reporting on it. And it was a really interesting, it was interesting. I don't want thanks for it, but it was like interesting that everyone was like, come on, that's enough. I'm like, no, he's not gone. When
but
he's
here's
gone,
the question.
It'll be enough.
He stayed down, but he kept the money.
Well, of course, I can't stop that. I'm sorry.
I mean, right, but how can we have enough of a deterrent, like where people are really scared now, their livelihood is in question?
Well, they always get the money. I'm sorry to tell you, they always end up with the money. You can't take that, but you can't, what are they going to do?
Well, there are certain, I will say, full disclosure, I'm one of the original investors of Uber, and I've known Travis for a long time. With that, I think there is when coming to their money, like there are people like Weinstein and Brett Ratner who have literally made their money on the literal backs of women.
Right. Yes.
Travis built Uber, and then did a lot of, very questionable, a lot of things that, made people want to, keep him down. But there is a difference in like when you get mad at somebody for, like all the money that he made, opposed to like Weinstein or Ratner or all these other people, or Woody Allen, who've made so much money off, other women and abusing them. I think that is.
Yeah, a little bit, except, to me, it was still he was the CEO, and I think the CEO is responsible for the company, period. Like
100%,
I hold you responsible for anything. Like, even if it wasn't you, you're the CEO,
It is,
and you're the last thing. And he allowed that to happen. I get that people love the founder, and they love to celebrate the founder, and hey, he's a founder, he's unusual, and stuff like that. But it was the idea that he was responsible for the culture that resulted in what occurred.
Well, talking about culture, Nancy, how do you go about changing corporate culture when women are still minority?
One of the things that corporate culture, I mean, we've talked about culture forever, and I don't know whether it's because my predecessor was a woman, a female CEO who I, took the reins from another woman. And this is, I spent a lot of time saying, well, I was the right candidate for the job, and I look back in this environment and go, well, maybe I wouldn't have gotten it if it were a man in the seat, that she did certain things and pushed me in certain ways and opened doors that I had to compete and win, but that, my style was not as much of an issue for her as it probably is for men. Well, and that I think that there's two conversations that, the safety of women, sexual harassment, and sexually predatory behavior is unacceptable, wrong, got it, we all, there's no tolerance. And a lot of men get to say, that's not me. But the issue, one of the areas that I have a lot of concern with is also bias, and the bias that comes into every room, and the likability of women. And my big thing is every single attribute that is unlikable in women is celebrated in men.
Right.
And
that's the truth.
And can I say that, the cultural condition is not equal across all the racial groups. A lot of this is a discovery, with all due respect, that white women are making, right? So, 50 years after emancipation, you have Sojourner Truth trying to fight for the right to vote for white women who wouldn't even march with her and wanted her to march in the back, right? And so you had white women who have had the protection of men and who have essentially been placed on a pedestal by men and who have therefore been valued mostly for their appearance, for their beauty, for sort of being on that pedestal. And, you talk about the fact that, 1964, we get the Civil Rights Act, 65, we get the Voting Rights Act. At that point, women still couldn't open up a bank account without a man. So that you were able to even get racial rights because as an African-American woman, we were just valued for our labor. We were just valued for the sweat of our back, like what we could contribute in terms of production. But for white women, there's been this sort of discovery that protection isn't real, right? And that you still have Fox News pay out tens of millions of dollars in settlements between Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly, but women still can't deliver the news on that network without a tight sweater and a short skirt on.
That's true. That is
You
true.
have a White House, right, where you're having this reckoning.
Yeah.
But, according to Michael Wolff's book, the uniform is tight sweaters and short skirts. And so I think what we have here is sort of a disconnect between what women of color have experienced in this country, where you are just labor, you're just cattle, and women, quite frankly, of the majority, who have to choose between the pedestal and their rights. And so I think what women of color are looking to see is, will women choose their rights, right? Because, black women have been lined up on one side of this the whole time. But I look at that Roy Moore moment, all the black ladies went this way, 2/3 of the white ladies went that way. So, I think for a lot of women of color, we've been saying, you're more valuable than just your appearance or your femininity, but you have to fight with all the other women.
I have to say, yes, I agree very much. And I think I'm glad. I'm glad white women are now jumping into that bandwagon with it's because it's no longer these other women.
Right.
It's every woman. It unites us actually in our grievances.
The scariest thing to men is all women united.
It also has to go to money. I mean, you were talking about that before. Now, by the way, Olivia, I hope you make a ton of money on Uber.
Me too.
It looks like it's doing good. But it does go to the money that you're getting, and where you have it. Like right now, we were just doing a thing about Bitcoin. 4% of the women investors, it's only 4% women in Bitcoin. Guess who's going to make all the, whatever it is, crypto, whatever it becomes, it may not be Bitcoin, but most of the early investors are almost all men. This is the next great wealth creation area. And so what's really interesting about it is that you don't see women participating in it, or you don't see them moving into the next thing. And that's really where the worrisome part is the value goes primarily to the same type of people. And I think until that changes, that's really going to be not having. One of my greatest regrets is I literally was offered a job at every single internet company at their earliest stages, and I said no to all of them, like an idiot. But I was saying this to someone the other day. I was like, I wish I had taken that job at Amazon because I'd be a billionaire and then I could be a Koch brothers of the left. And just fuck with people with my billions. Like, wouldn't that be great? And
you can.
I can't now, but now I'm thinking of going into cryptocurrency because, but it's a really interesting thing because if you don't get in on the money-making part of it, that's where it really matters.
And it
ownership, the ownership part of it.
We have to look into that. And I actually want to take it to you, Nancy, because you do sit in the board of Vice Media, which just became the subject of a class action lawsuit alleging systematic pay disparity. How do you, from a board perspective, how can such thing change? When you can argue, well, it's in the interest of business that we keep the disparity going on. How do you change that?
No, I don't think anyone, I mean, I don't know whether that's my naivete.
Well, not in Vice, but I feel like
if you're a creative organization and you have to attract all creative, you can't sustain a company that is openly has disparity. It just isn't the case. And I think they've made a lot of effort, and they have to be accountable for this, and they have to be accountable for the statements that they've made about pay parity by the end of 2018, and there are independent counsel that's in that organization trying to trudge up where it is, how to fix it, where to reconcile. They've publicly declared an attempt for the 50-50 by 2020, and I think, look, it is not great. It is not good. And the culture that it was allowed to exist there was very emblematic of a counterculture skate club. I mean, if you think of the genesis of this organization that, was never acceptable, but was 20 guys, and all of a sudden became 3,000 people, and part of, one of the media darling stories of the last couple of years, and now the reckoning has come to them. But I will say, when I look at the other, just media companies alone, there aren't a lot of leaders out there making public declarations that they're going to be held to around what they're going to do to fix it.
But here's my question. The pay disparity between women and men has been going on for decades.
In every industry.
And we have statistics after statistics and studies and saying this, and still it has not been addressed. So what would it take for, so men are losing their jobs, it's not being addressed yet. What would it take for this change to happen?
Hopefully what we're going through now will start to address it because there's an openness, a legal, risk in not addressing it. I mean, when you make a policy declaration that by the end of 2018 you will have achieved pay parity, and then you do not address it, that's a much bigger problem than dealing with it in private. And I think
there also has to be a feeling of how, there's all these questions about blind, Silicon Valley, you're talking about all these issues, blind salary, the same level, so you don't have to sit and negotiate over these things. And it's a very difficult thing because women are not trained to negotiate quite in the same way. It just is true. And how do we get that? If we have to operate in this system, how does that happen? And I think it's really hard. I mean, when I did a negotiation with someone, I remember I had to earn a little less money to take more stock. It was complicated. And I remember the man they're like, come on, Kara, take a little less. We'll be friends. We'll go out. We'll go out. It'll be great. But just take a little less and a little bit of this. I said, how about you give me the fucking money and then I'll take you out for drinks.
I like it.
And
Show me the money.
It was really interesting because he was like this, and because he was like this sort of playing into, I'll like you better if you did. I go, I'm a lesbian. I don't want to date you. So it's let's move on to the money. And so it was interesting, and it was sort of jarring. And I'm like, give me the money. And they're like, well, I'm like, I'm not leaving without.
There is this let's all get along thing.
Yes, let's all get along.
But that's what I was going to say is that when for me, my agents or my lawyers will negotiate, but it's with the business affairs of the studio.
Right.
That business affairs guy is usually a man, and it's a white man, and so they will normally give more to the guys and not give it to the women. And then what happens is you go, well, then just say you won't do it. Well, there's a lot of other people who will do it.
Right.
And then
that's the
then
problem
what
in
do you do?
Hollywood.
It's like, okay, do I build it? Do I? So for me personally, what I've always done is I'm gonna work, and you take the hits along the way, and the pay hit, and you kind of to get this to a certain point, and then at that point, you save a lot of money so that you don't overspend, don't have a house you can't afford, things like that. So you can say no, so you can just preserve what you've what you've created, but there's a certain point where you have to say, you have to take a lot less all the time because they expect that of us.
But you can also, I mean, Ava DuVernay and Oprah Winfrey and other people have said, you know what, the other alternative is just make your own projects.
Right,
and sort of build up enough capital to be able to be the boss and pay yourself and everyone else what you want. And I mean, women in the corporate world are also still penalized by the assumption that they're going to take time off to have children, that they're going to have all these other responsibilities. At the same time, we have a society that's trying to regress on women's liberty not to have children. And so there's still this sort of presumption that women's prime directive is mothering. Yeah. And that if you're doing anything other than that, you're actually detracting from what it is that God put you on this earth to do. And so I don't need to pay you 100% because that man will come in as if they don't have to be a dad, right? They're going to be here whenever we need them at 8, and you've got to go home and feed your kids. Well, maybe he's got to go home and feed your kids, you know?
Well, that's the cultural patriarchy that we're talking about. That's what Steve Bannon is talking about, actually.
Absolutely.
You know? But talking about Steve Bannon, I want to bring it to Mike Pence, because a lot of Hollywood people in Silicon Valley reported saying, "I'm going to Mike Pence it."
Mike Pence.
Can you tell us what that does that mean? And and what's your answer to those guys?
I can't believe I get through every day without assaulting 9 or 10 people. I'm so glad I don't have a gun. I literally was sitting there with a VC, and he goes, sometimes I feel like now I'm going to have to Mike Pence it in meetings with women, because, they could talk about, they could say something happened that didn't happen. I'm like, well, did you grab their boob? Well, no. And I'm like, well, why do you need someone there to make sure you didn't? They could say it. I said, who in the world says, what woman does that? Like, where is that unicorn woman who's always going around trying to trick and men? Like, this is ridiculous. But they literally in their minds, they have to Mike Pence it. And it's so offensive on so many levels that you just don't even know what to say. And I just didn't know what to say.
But I mean, we have to raise better men, maybe, that understand that if you have to be worried that
the mother's problem again.
Right.
Well, I mean, our fault.
As fathers are involved, that, men who believe that, if they're alone in a room with a woman, they're going to be accused of, grabbing a woman, then maybe they're grabbing women. Like, maybe if you can't be alone with a woman, you shouldn't be.
The thing is, it's not only the men who are grabbing women. I think when I'm calling even the good guys who are saying, I didn't grab, I didn't do anything, there's an institutional issue. There's a subconscious issue that is of behavior of discriminating against women, and that's the problem.
It's fascinating because literally my sons have been raised by 2 lesbians, okay? And my ex, Megan Smith, she was the CTO of America. She drags them up to Suffragette City up in upper state New York every year to visit the Declaration of Intentions, and they have to memorize it. These guys, we live in the Castro of San Francisco. These guys should be woke, right? You got it? And literally when one of the things happened, one of my sons was like, well, Mom, men can get sexually harassed too. And I go, what? Like 1%, or 2%. He goes, yeah, we got to think of that too. I go, no, let's not think of that at all. Let's not think of just the 98% women. He's like, well, you got to be fair. And I go, no, that's not fair at all. And I was like, no, what happened?
There was the crazy thing where when this is happening, what drives me crazy is so many guys want to say to me, they're like, well, not all guys are they want to
but not all guys.
Hey, well, not all women are victims. So just because we're talking about some of the guys who have been abusers and then some of the women who have been victimized and then survived it, doesn't mean that we're talking about all. I'm just talking, but they get so defensive that if you say this man, they're like, that it means all
That's not me. They do that, that's not me. And so what I say to a lot of these VCs when they're like, well, what should we do? I'm like, here's some tips. Don't talk about sex at work. Don't grab boobs at work. No. Hire women. That'll work for all of us.
I also think there's a big style thing here too. Yeah. Like, it's not just the physical of it. It's the, why is it bad if I'm ambitious, and why is it bad if I'm
not smiling all the time?
I'm not smiling anything. You could be a little happier. Oh, my, fucking sucks right now. I'm not happy, and why,
Nancy, you look so much prettier if you smile.
I get that. I actually get that,
I got it on stage at a Van Ferry event.
Calms people, you could just smile once in a while.
But doesn't that go back to that goes back to the valuation of women, right? The value of women is in their smile, is in their cute outfit, is in how pretty they are. And I think that that standard just gets reinforced and reinforced even when it gets brought into the modern era. It doesn't change.
Well, that's
but even personality, it's not just the physical. It's I'm gonna speak up, or I'm gonna push back, or I'm not gonna agree. And That's like new territory for a lot of
Because
these guys.
we're almost out of time, I want to like have it like last word for everyone is what are the concrete things that we need to do right now, you know, to make sure that we capture this moment and lead to transformative change. 1 minute each, even less.
For me, I think the most important thing is to keep showing such gratitude to all the people who use their voices and their social media platforms to show their outrage and their support for the people that speak up and for calling out these people and making sure that there are companies like Vice and all the other places that when they say they're going to do something and they're going to make it right, that they show up and they do it. And as long as everyone just you know, we'll stay woke if you stay woke too.
We're watching you, basically.
Yeah. We'll just keep helping us.
I would say vote for women. Hire women if you're in a position to, and promote women. Let the men sort it out when we're in charge.
All right. Nancy?
You know, I think we have to figure out ways to engage in conversation that is impacting everybody in workplaces. So there's bias across the board, and how do you bring these conversations to the forefront and keep this alive and give people an entree and a way to talk openly about making real change in the rooms. The rooms have to change, boardrooms, senior rooms, decision-making rooms, and that's only going to happen with, you know, peeling back the bias challenges that we all have.
Very true.
I would say take power, rip it from their hands if you have to, stay real angry for a long, long time, forever maybe.
And then do yoga.
Do yoga sometimes. I just went on a yoga retreat.
yoga.
It was very funny. I'm really not good at yoga. No, absolutely take power and stay furious all the time. It is, and don't be the one to, like, we're always asked to, like, okay, come on now, let's go along. Don't go along. Just don't go along. And they'll give up because men have never had children, so they don't know what pain is. You know what I mean? Like, they will wimp out.
And on this note, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.